So picture this scenario, right? You are sitting in traffic.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Right. You're running late, you're gripping the steering wheel a little too tightly, and right in front of you, someone just blatantly runs a red light.
Just sails right through it.
Exactly. Or maybe they cut across 3 lanes without using a blinker and they nearly cause this massive pileup.
Yeah. Terrifying.
What is the very first thought that pops into your head? If you are like most of us, it is some variation of, someone needs to fix this. Or why isn't the city doing anything about these drivers?
Yeah. I mean, it is the most natural automatic reflex in the world. We see chaos and we instinctively look outward for a solution. We look for the authority figure, right? The rule maker, the enforcer to just step in and restore order.
Well, today we are going to completely dismantle that reflex.
We really are.
Yeah, our mission for this deep dive is to entirely reframe how you think about road safety, and we are drawing exclusively from Chapter 6 of the book HarGhar Se EkSainik.
Just Chapter 6, yeah.
Right. This specific chapter is titled The Mirror We Avoid, and it holds up a deeply uncomfortable mirror to our own daily unquestioned habits. We're looking at the truth about who actually owns the danger on our roads and why we are so desperate to look the other way.
It's a perspective shift that requires some pretty brutal honesty, to be fair.
Yeah.
Because before we can even talk about fixing roads or rewriting traffic laws, the source text demands that we look at the language we use to shield ourselves from responsibility.
Language. Like what?
Specifically, it points to the 5 most popular and ultimately the most useless words spoken about traffic.
Oh, okay, let me guess. The government should do something.
That's the one.
I mean, I have said those words. I probably said them on my commute this morning, honestly.
We all have. After every near miss, after every frustrating gridlock, and especially after every headline tragedy, those 5 words emerge like clockwork. But Chapter 6 highlights the profound cognitive dissonance of who is usually saying them. Because the person pointing furiously at the transportation ministry and demanding, sweeping action is very often the exact same person whose helmet has been gathering dust on a hook for 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Or they are the person who just rationalized checking a text message while merging onto the highway because they think they are good at multitasking.
It's basically a form of psychological outsourcing, isn't it?
Exactly.
It reminds me of, someone complaining loudly about the toxic, gossipy culture at their office while they are standing right by the water cooler actively spreading rumors about a coworker.
That is a perfect analogy.
You are demanding a change in an environment that you are actively polluting.
That captures the mechanism perfectly. I mean, blaming the government is a wildly popular reflex because it asks absolutely nothing of the individual.
Right, it's easy.
It is a cost-free position. The moment you place the burden of safety on an external entity, you grant yourself this psychological relief. It absolves you of your own micro-transgressions on the road.
But hold on, let me push back a little here. The government actually is the entity in charge of the infrastructure.
Sure, yeah.
They pour the asphalt, they design the intersections, they program the traffic lights, and, they hire the police force. If a road is riddled with potholes or an intersection is notoriously blind, it seems entirely rational to point the finger at the state.
And the text absolutely does not let the government off the hook for infrastructure and enforcement. Those are real systemic failures.
Right.
But we have to recognize the physical limitations of state power. The government, with all its budgets and all its traffic cops, cannot physically sit in your passenger seat and pull the seatbelt across your chest.
Yeah, that's true.
They cannot reach over and pry the smartphone out of your hand when you hear a notification ping. There is a boundary where policy ends and personal agency begins.
Right, they can build a perfectly engineered, brilliantly lit highway, but they cannot engineer my attention span.
Yes, and that is the core argument of the chapter. When we transfer all the responsibility to the state through this comfortable mechanism of blame, we ensure that we do not have to change a single personal habit.
And so nothing changes.
Consequently, absolutely nothing changes on the asphalt. The book makes a vital distinction here. The real danger lives in the gap between a lawbreaker and a lifesaver.
A lawbreaker and a lifesaver.
Yeah, and that gap is not made of policy. It is made of personal identity.
Meaning the difference between doing something to avoid a penalty versus doing something because it aligns with your fundamental values.
Exactly. If you only wear a helmet because there's a traffic camera at the next intersection, Your safety is entirely dependent on external compliance.
Right, the second the camera is out of view, the helmet comes off.
Exactly. But if you see yourself as a lifesaver, as a protector of your own life and the lives of the people you share the road with, your behavior is internally regulated. It doesn't change just because the enforcement vanishes.
Okay, but if the root of the problem is our internal identity and our deeply entrenched daily habits, that feels like, well, a massive dead end.
How so?
People don't just rewrite their identities on a Tuesday. I mean, I know drivers who have steered with their knees while eating and texting for 2 decades. The idea that human beings can fundamentally overhaul a habit that ingrained seems overly optimistic.
It sounds impossible until you look at the historical data.
Hmm.
The text actually provides 2 undeniable proofs that human populations are entirely capable of massive, overnight behavioral change.
Really? What's the first proof?
The first proof is something the entire globe just lived through, the COVID-19 pandemic.
Wait, taking biological crisis and applying it to traffic patterns. Let's look at how the book connects those dots.
Well, think about the sociological mechanics of the early pandemic. Almost overnight, entire populations dismantled how they lived. Yeah, that's true.
People who had spent 40 years living highly social, tactile lives suddenly stayed indoors. We maintained physical distance from our neighbors. We wore masks everywhere, washed our hands raw, and completely halted our economic and social rhythms.
It did.
And we did this voluntarily, with a compliance rate that any transportation department would literally kill for.
But wasn't that because the nature of the threat was fundamentally different? I mean, a virus feels immediate. You look at a daily death toll on the news, and the threat of bringing that virus into your home is terrifying.
Exactly.
You didn't isolate because the government told you to. You isolated to protect the people sleeping down the hall.
Precisely. The danger was perceived as deeply personal and mortal. On the road, however, the danger is largely invisible right up until the millisecond it becomes fatal.
Invisible danger, right?
We operate with this massive psychological blind spot called survivorship bias.
Oh, I've heard of that. Yeah, so every single time you check your phone at 60 miles an hour and don't crash, your brain logs that as hard evidence that the behavior is safe. The threat doesn't feel real.
Wow, so true.
But the pandemic proves that when humans correctly perceive a threat to their lives, our capacity to instantly change our habits is fully intact.
So we just have a categorization error. We categorize a virus as a mortal threat, but we categorize, piloting 2 tons of metal at high speeds as a casual secondary activity.
Right, just something we do while listening to music.
Okay, so that makes sense. What is the second proof the book offers?
The second proof of our capacity to change is foreign travel.
Oh, the context switch. This is
Yeah.
fascinating. So you take a notoriously aggressive driver from their hometown, drop them in a rental car in a foreign country, and suddenly they are a model citizen.
They transform instantly. I mean, they stay perfectly centered in their lane, respect the speed limit to the decimal, and yield to every pedestrian. The seatbelt is fastened before the key even touches the ignition.
It is the adult equivalent of a teenager whose bedroom at home looks like an absolute disaster zone. But when they sleep over at a friend's house, they are suddenly folding the blankets and offering to wash the dinner dishes.
Yes, exactly.
The physical capability to be neat, or in our case, to be a meticulously safe driver, is already installed in their brain. It is the environmental expectation that flips the switch.
You nailed it. When you are abroad, the environment silently but firmly expects compliance. You adjust your behavior to match that unfamiliar expectation because you lack the confidence to break the rules.
You don't know what you can get away with.
Right. But when you return to your familiar roads, you reintegrate into a collective, unspoken cultural permission to be careless. We implicitly agree with each other that in our town, the rules are merely suggestions.
That shift back from character to compliance. Abroad, we rely on compliance out of fear of foreign police.
Yep.
At home, where we are comfortable bending the rules, we desperately need character to step in, but we fall back on that cultural permission instead.
And we have to ask how that cultural permission to be careless is manufactured and sustained. Because it isn't just an abstract concept floating over the highway.
Right, where does it come from?
It is actively reinforced by us every single day. Not just on the road, but on our screens. The source material maps this out through what it calls the outrage cycle.
The 4-day spin cycle of grief and blame. Whenever there is a major road tragedy, it always follows a script.
A painfully predictable script. Day 1, the victim's family naturally blames the driver.
Of course.
Day 2, the driver's defense blames the poor road conditions or poor lighting. Day 3, The media blames the government for failing to fix the lighting.
Then day 4.
Day 4, social media erupts with hashtags, fiery think pieces, and demands for justice.
And then day 5, absolute silence. The trending topic shifts, the outrage dissipates, and critically, everyone goes right back to driving exactly the way they did on day 0.
The cycle acts as an emotional pressure release valve. It produces a tremendous amount of noise, which makes society feel like it is doing something, but it produces zero actual behavioral change.
Right.
To ground this in reality, the chapter details a specific devastating incident. It involves a brother and sister who were driving while making a video, like a reel, for social media.
Oh, man. They were prioritizing the production of digital content over the operation of a vehicle.
Yeah.
And because their attention was consumed by performance for an invisible audience, they struck and killed a young delivery driver.
Yeah. And the contrast the author draws between the two sides of that impact, it forces us to look at the machinery of privilege.
How so?
On one side, you have the delivery driver. The text paints a picture of his life. He was the culmination of his mother's lifelong sacrifices. She had worked for decades as a domestic worker in other people's homes, saving every fraction of a rupee, pouring her entire existence into his future.
That is heartbreaking.
It really is. In a fraction of a second, all of that history, sacrifice, and potential was obliterated.
Yeah.
For content.
And on the other side of the impact?
The driver of the car was underage, but because they came from a background of significant means, they were able to activate the levers of privilege. They secured bail almost immediately.
So the road might be a brutal physical equalizer, but the aftermath of the road distributes consequences based entirely on what a family can afford to absorb.
That is the dark reality of the aftermath, yeah. But the chapter pushes us to examine the root cause. Like, why were those teenagers making that reel? Why is reckless driving categorized as compelling content in the first place?
Well, look at the media we consume. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry built on high-speed chases, cars drifting through crowded markets, and characters walking away from catastrophic crashes without a scratch. Our brains are conditioned to view vehicular chaos as a cinematic thrill.
We are entertained by it, sure.
Yeah.
But the book highlights the lethal danger of blurring those lines. Action movies use stunt professionals, specialized rigging, and strictly controlled, closed environments.
They aren't real life.
Exactly. Most importantly, movies operate with suspended physics. The scenes are meticulously engineered to remove the deadly consequences.
Whereas social media removes the visual cues of danger while keeping the real-world consequences entirely intact.
Exactly that.
When an influencer films themselves weaving through traffic, they are projecting Hollywood confidence onto real tarmac, where gravity and mass have no mercy.
There is no stunt coordinator to yell cut on a public road. But the author argues that the deeper issue isn't Hollywood or even the influencers themselves. The issue is the audience.
Us.
Yeah. When we scroll through our feeds and see a dashboard camera video of a reckless overtake or someone driving at insane speeds and we tap the like button, or we forward it to a group chat with a laughing emoji, we're actively casting a vote for that behavior.
So every time I tap the heart on one of those videos, I am essentially funding the next stunt.
Yes, you are.
I am providing the digital endorsement that tells that creator, yes, treat the public highway like your personal movie set. I am watching.
That digital endorsement is the lifeblood of the culture that gets people killed. The cultural permission we talked about earlier isn't just unspoken. It is quantified in likes, shares, and views.
Okay, but if tapping like is a vote for a dangerous culture, how do we begin to vote for a safe one? It feels like shifting a culture that massive would require, I don't know, a nationwide campaign or a massive celebrity leveraging their platform.
It seems like that, but the book introduces a concept that completely decentralizes that power. It calls it the five-person circle.
It's a five-person circle.
Yeah, it argues that genuine, durable cultural change does not start with a multi-million-dollar public service announcement. It starts in the most intimate, mundane spaces of our lives. It starts with the 5 people you share a WhatsApp group with, the people you sit across from at dinner.
Oh, it's the microculture.
Exactly.
I think about the psychological friction of being the first person in a friend group to speak up and say a running joke has finally crossed a line. It is incredibly awkward for about 10 seconds. Everyone bristles.
Yeah, nobody likes doing it.
But by introducing that friction, you completely reset the boundaries of what that group deems acceptable.
That is the exact mechanism of the 5-person circle, applied to the digital endorsement we just discussed. Someone in your group chat drops a video of a motorcycle doing a dangerous wheelie in traffic, and the predictable wave of fire emojis and laughing faces starts rolling in.
Right, everyone's hyping it up.
The behavior is being implicitly sanctioned by your community.
So in that moment, the gap between the lawbreaker and the lifesaver comes down to whether you are willing to break the social contract of the chat. You have to introduce a competing note.
Yes. And you don't have to deliver a preachy lecture or be aggressive. You simply reply with one honest observation. Something as simple as, that could have been someone's last morning.
Wow, that immediately halts the momentum. It injects reality back into the suspended physics of the video.
The text describes the results of that comment beautifully. It creates a brief, socially awkward pause in the conversation. And the author writes, that pause is the sound of permission being questioned.
I love that, the sound of permission being questioned.
Yeah. By taking on that tiny amount of social friction, you are revoking the unspoken agreement that reckless driving is harmless entertainment.
It is recognizing our duty of influence. I mean, a celebrity with 100 million followers absolutely has a duty of influence. If they casually wear a seatbelt or a helmet in their everyday posts, they subconsciously normalize safety for millions of people who follow them rather than institutions.
For sure.
But the exact same mechanism applies to a parent driving their kids to school.
Yes. A parent has a captive audience in the backseat every single day. If you rationalize skipping the seatbelt for a 5-minute drive, or if you roll down the window to scream at a pedestrian, you are actively writing the behavioral code for how your child will operate a vehicle 15 years from now.
Right. What you tolerate in your 5-person circle, whether it is your group chat, your dining table, or your passenger seat, eventually becomes the macro standard of your culture. You don't need a megaphone to be a lifesaver. You just have to decide what you will stop silently endorsing.
Exactly. So, to summarize, the journey of this chapter, road safety is not a waiting game for a better designed intersection or a harsher government penalty.
Well,
We already possess the capability to radically alter our habits overnight, as the pandemic and foreign travel have thoroughly proven.
we just have to choose to do it.
Right. The actual difficult work is dismantling the silent cultural permission we give each other to be negligent.
We have to move past the psychological comfort of blaming the state and take rigorous ownership of our own identity when we get behind the wheel. The stakes of this shift are captured in a really haunting line from the chapter. The asphalt holds the imprint of your velocity for a moment, while the doorway of your home holds the shape of your absence forever.
It is a devastating reminder of the permanence of these decisions.
It really is. But as we look at how entirely dependent the system is on human character, it raises a fascinating question about the future. We are rapidly moving toward an era of automated braking, lane assist, and eventually fully self-driving cars.
Yeah.
We are essentially engineering technology to solve a crisis of human behavior.
That's a great point.
Right. If we outsource our safety entirely to algorithms, we might save lives. But do we lose the daily collective practice of looking out for one another? If the car does the stopping for us, do we permanently lose the opportunity to bridge that gap between the lawbreaker and the lifesaver?
That is a profound thought to leave on. And I would just add one final challenge for you, the listener, to mull over. The next time you are in a car with a friend who checks their phone, or you see a dangerous driving video pop up in your group chat, just notice your own silence.
Just observe it.
Yeah. Ask yourself in that exact moment, are you being a bystander to the culture, or are you going to be the one who changes it?
It's something to consider the next time you turn the key. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into HarGhar Se EkSainik. We hope you carried this perspective with you onto the roads today.